At this point, there's very little that'll make any difference. I can protest that I'm a victim. I always was a victim, the same as everybody, but I don't ask for your forgiveness. I'm writing this to tell you how it happened. That won't matter either, I guess. It's the only thing I can do at this point, so it's what I'm doing. I found the guitar in an old pawn shop in Boston. The proprietor was a caricature of a pawnbroker, a bent little old man with a hooked nose and wisps of red hair around his ears, his face creased with a permanent frown from too many years of feigning disgust with the stuff that people brought him. I didn't bother speaking with him at first. I just walked up and down the narrow aisles between the shelves stacked with endless junk. I thought people were supposed to bring their valuables to pawn, but this guy had somehow acquired piles of rusty old handwood working tools, random glassware and salt shakers, chipped china and flatware that wasn't even silver. I felt curiously drawn to the battered old wardrobe that looked like it had been built out of leftover tongue-and-groove sliding. I almost opened it, but I was sure that it could only be filled with mink coats, and judging from the rest of his stuff, probably moth-eaten mink coats. I felt his eyes glued onto me, waiting for me to try and lift something. With my mohawk and torn jeans, I often get that look, but given the worthlessness of his crap, it was almost insulting. I said screw it and headed for the door.
"Can I help you with something?"
Husky and suspicious. I looked him straight in the eye. "I doubt you have a guitar." He almost smiled. The corners of his mouth twitched, but then I think they couldn't remember how smiling worked and gave up on it.
"I might have a guitar," he said, "for the right price."
This didn't sound promising. He didn't say anything more. I wondered if he was expecting me to fork over the money sight unseen. "Well, do you or don't you, old man?"
"I do, kid,"
he said, which I had to respect. After I called him old man, it was only fair that he called me kid, but I liked how he said it, deliberate, and to be clear, he was just giving me back what was mine.
"Look in the wardrobe right behind you. Don't open the case, just bring it over to the counter."
It was the wardrobe that I had almost opened. I did, now, and found it contained nothing but a dusty, rectangular guitar case. I humored the old man and carried it over to the counter. I put it down so that it would open towards him, since he obviously didn't want me handling it until I bought it. He turned it around, flipped open the clasps, and pulled it open, shrinking down behind the lid. Later, I would note that the maneuver protected him from the sight of the guitar. I doubt he really understood what he had, but he wasn't totally ignorant. At the time, though, I just put it down to be showmanship. Inside was the most amazing black guitar I'd ever seen. It was so black it looked like there was no guitar there at all, just some silver frets and strings stretched across nothing. A guitar-shaped rip in the universe. I reached into the case just to touch it, just to be sure that there was a guitar there. The old man closed the case part way, nearly trapping my hand inside, and I didn't pull away.
Nah,
he said, his lips curling back from his teeth.
"Not here."
"I can't buy it if I don't try it," I said.
"Take your hands out of the case,"
he said. I did. I wanted the guitar. I had to hear it first, but frankly, if it didn't play at all, I still would have bought it. If I could afford it, it was cool. He shut the case and fastened the latches.
"Take it into the basement. There's an old amplifier down there. You can plug it in and play it, but see here? The volume on the amplifier is set to 2, right? It stays on 2.
"Sure," I said. "Whatever." He laid a bony hand on a red fire extinguisher at the end of the counter.
"See this? You know what this is for?"
"Putting out fires?"
"You think so, wouldn't you? But check the pressure gauge."
I looked at the dial on top. It was all the way down on empty.
"The only thing it's good for is bashing out the brains of people who don't follow the rules. Got it? The volume stays on 2.
Somehow I wasn't too frightened at the thought of this old man trying to assault me with a fire extinguisher, except for the thought of trying to convince the police that the punk had acted in self-defense when he broke the little old shopkeeper in two. It didn't matter. I didn't need the guitar to be loud to tell if it could play. I took the case and went through the little black door down the steep stairs. It crossed my mind that I was probably doing something stupid, going into this crazy old man's cellar, looking for, a cask of Amontillado, but frankly, the door was so flimsy that if he tried to lock it behind me, I could just turn it into kindling. All he did was yell at me to keep the volume on 2. In the basement was a chest freezer, a big converted coal furnace, some broken furniture, and a vintage amplifier. I put the guitar down on the freezer and opened the case again. Down in the basement, it looked even blacker than before, if that were possible. I touched the guitar just to assure myself that it was real. My hand stopped, so there was definitely something there, but I couldn't really feel it. It had all the friction of black ice, but no sensation of cold. A sensation of vertigo crept over me as if I were going to fall into the nothingness. Impulsively, I grabbed a strap that at least felt like leather and lifted the guitar so it hung on my shoulder. It had the weight like a guitar. The sensation of vertigo left me when I wasn't staring right at it. I fished out a patch cord out of the case and plugged it into the amp and switched it on. I turned up the volume to 2.5 just to screw with the old man, and then touched the strings. just the tiny sound a guitar makes when the club owner pulls the plug on your show. I only had a moment of disappointment before I remembered that this amplifier probably had vacuum tubes and it would need to warm up before it could actually play. I waited a minute. The amplifier hummed with potential, and then I struck out the opening strings, or I meant to. I hit them one after another in a slow arpeggio just to hear how far out of tune it was, but the first note, my fingers froze. It was indescribable, a deep, resonant tone that sounded like it came out of the primeval past, a note imagined by alien races that had looked down on Earth when all life was just a slime at the bottom of the sea. It unseated my bowels from the rest in my viscera and set them floating uneasily. I took a deep breath and plucked out the first 7 notes from Stairway to Heaven. It seemed like the right riff to try. The guitar spoke with the voice of God, but not the all-forgiving God of the Gospels, nor even the strict penitent God from the evangelicals. This was the Old Testament God, mighty and awful, the God that shook mountains and spoke in thunder and trumpets, the God that smote the Amalekites by the thousands. My head swam. I was terrified, and at the same time, I had to have this guitar. I would pay whatever price that old man asked. I snapped off the amplifier and forced myself to walk slowly up the stairs. The door was unlocked, and the old man was sitting back where he had been, behind his counter, adding rows of his figures in his little black book. I tried to act casual. "How much do you want for it?" It came out as shaky and tense as a whisper. So much for acting casual. The old man would have had to be deaf to not know that I'd pay whatever price he asked, but maybe he was deaf. He didn't even look up, and I repeated myself louder and less desperate. He glanced up, surprised to see me standing in front of him, and then he took out an earplug out of one ear. If he hadn't heard me, he knew what I said.
$2,000.
My stomach, already dangerously unmoored, flipped over again. That was 4 times what I had told myself was my maximum price when I set out guitar hunting. I drew a deep breath and tried, "I can't pay more."
Ah!
He interrupted and thumped his hand against the sign on the wall behind him.
Do not try to dicker. All prices are firm.
On another day, I knew that just because you put something on a sign doesn't make it true. Saying that he didn't dicker was just the first round of dickering. But I didn't have it in me. I had to have the guitar. I took out my wallet and pulled out my credit card, wondering what hope I would ever have of paying this off.
Can't you read?
He stalled and thumped his hand against the lettered sign.
All sales are cash only.
Can I hold it with a deposit? I asked.
How much you got? He asked.
$50, I said.
There's a cash machine on the corner. You could take out $250 and make it $300.
I could. I'd even have enough left to eat until payday. Paying rent would take some imagination, but I could do this. It may take me a while to work up the rest and come back. Even as I said it, I knew it was hopeless. I'd never have $1,700 in cash, and not even if I took out a cash advance on the credit card and paid it in 30% interest rate.
No, he said. Don't come back. If you walk in my door again, I'll bash your brains out with this fire extinguisher. But $300, he said, in cash. Go get it right now. Then take your guitar and get the hell out of here. If I see you again, I'll kill you.
The man was clearly raving mad, but $300 was the price I could pay. I went out to the cash machine and traded all my money for the guitar, and left before he could make good on his threat. It was only then that I realized that I'd given him my entire bus fare home. I wound up walking almost 2 miles through the city. I got home late and tired. Playing the guitar seemed like too much of a momentous thing to attempt at this state. I put it aside, microwaved a can of mushroom soup, and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep well. I dreamed about the guitar, and in my dreams it wasn't just black. There were stars twinkling in the void. When I tried to pick it up, my hand went right through it. It felt like I could reach deep in and scoop out a handful of scars, except I figured they'd be terribly hot. I thought they'd make tiny little burns on my hand. There was something behind the stars, too. Something vast and restless, along slowly roiling in the dark. I didn't want to touch that thing. I didn't want to disturb it. It was asleep, but not deeply. I hardly dared to breathe. If I woke it, I had no idea. Something very bad would happen. I was miserable the next day, and the day after that, so I never took the guitar out again until the night I rehearsed with the band. We called ourselves Chthonic Circus. We were a lean bar band, splitting our meager earnings just 3 ways. Leslie fronted the vocals and defined our sound with a loud, rumbling bass. She was a scary little thing, a knife of moodiness under a big mop of black hair. She disappeared under layers of a black canvas and orange striped tights. On the drums was Ethan, an undurfed stick of a man with big frog eyes. Every once in a while, he put off shaving until he had an inch of see-through whiskers on his chin. No one would ever call it a beard. Then he gave it up and cut it off. I don't know what you'd call our style. Post-punk or goth are the most frequent labels we get, but we do occasionally go off into the technically demanding solo, like a progressive band. But we studiously avoided the grand, pseudo-philosophical lyrics of progressive, and our themes were too dark. One reviewer in a local scene rag described us as playing dense macabre, which I thought was a great description, but it didn't stick. We got the plug pulled on us once after a patron complained to the bartender that we were depressing. I came here because I feel bad and want to feel better. These guys just make me want to kill myself. I felt a little bad about that. My hope is always that we'll make those guys feel understood, but there is a badge of honor in getting kicked out of a club. I made a production out of my new guitar, telling Leslie and Ethan that they'd never seen anything like it and getting them to stand around while I opened up the case. I watched their faces, opening it as the shop owner had, standing behind the lid as I raised it. Leslie frowned. Ethan's jaw dropped open. "What is that made of?" Leslie whispered. She reached out to touch it, but hesitated. "It's like the void," Ethan said. "It's like staring into infinity, the black sky between the stars." "Does it sound as good as it looks?" Leslie asked. I just smiled. I lifted up the strap, hung it from my shoulder, and for some reason I kept my gaze averted from the guitar, as if I expected to see the thing from my nightmare still rolling around beneath the darkness. I patched it into the amplifier, turned up the volume up to 7, and struck an E minor chord. It vibrated the windows. It was a full, dark sound, but it wasn't the voice of God. It was just an electric guitar. Disappointed, I tried hitting the strings one at a time, just as I had done at the pawn shop. Just an electric guitar. "Good enough," Ethan said. "Damn, that hurts my eyes." "It's like it's pulling your eyeballs out of the sockets," Leslie said, and turned away. She busied herself setting up her bass. Ethan continued to stare. Maybe it was the volume. Maybe that's why the proprietor had insisted I kept the volume on too. Maybe it only sounded that good when it was quiet. I turned the volume down and plugged the strings again. Still just a guitar, only quieter. "It sounded a lot better at the shop," I said. "Sounds great to me," Leslie said. "No," I said. "It sounded like it came out of the abyss. I still remember the sound of those strings I touched. I hadn't imagined it. They were burned into my memory." "Maybe it has something to do with the acoustics where you were," Leslie said. "I heard this podcast about these guys who were trying to reproduce the acoustics of ancient cathedrals. They turned this ordinary chorus into the voice of angels." It couldn't have been," I said. "I was just in a guy's basement with a big old furnace and a freezer and concrete walls. Could it have been? Could there have just been some freak perfection of the dimensions and objects? It didn't seem possible." "Could there have been an effect block patched into the amp?" Ethan asked. He was still staring at me, and he hadn't moved toward his drums. "I don't see how," I said. "It was just an old tube amplifier." "Oh. Well, that's it," Ethan said. That's that vintage sound. I heard Neil Young still uses a tube amplifier because he likes the vintage sound. Things cost a fortune nowadays because no one makes the tubes anymore." I thought about this. I knew everything Ethan had said, but I doubted an amplifier could make that much a difference. If tubes could make a guitar sound what I had heard, then no one would have ever invented solid-state electronics. "Hey, Ethan," Leslie said, "put your eyes back in their sockets and get on your drums. No matter how beautiful his guitar is, we still gotta play music." "I don't know," Ethan said. "They might book us just so people could look at that guitar." It took him 3 tries to tear his eyes away and sit down at his drums. The practice didn't go well. I was distracted by my disappointment, and my bandmates were distracted by my guitar. Twice Ethan lost the tempo, slowing down while he stared at my belly. And then in the middle of the 3rd song, Leslie screeched and stopped playing. "Sorry," she said, shaking her head. Most of the evening she had been avoiding looking at me, but then she took a long look at my guitar. "Sorry, I don't know. I swear I saw something moving in your guitar. It was just like a window into somewhere, and there was something moving." "I think it's alive," Ethan said, staring at me. "Maybe that's why it's not making the sound you want. Maybe you gotta have the right relationship with it. Before it will sing for you." "It played for me before," I said. I didn't believe him. Not really. But in Leslie's dark studio, it didn't sound so crazy. "Well, yeah, but then you weren't trying to show it off," Ethan said. "Then all your focus was on the guitar, wanting to hear the guitar. Tonight, you're wanting to show off the cool guitar you got. Your focus is on you. It doesn't want to put on a show to make you look cool." This is crazy, Leslie said. We can't practice like this. Why don't you, face the wall or something? No offense, but it's just a guitar, I said. Yeah, but you don't look at it either. Whatever, let's just play, I said, but I did turn away from them. It didn't do any good. I was too annoyed and disappointed. Leslie was too rattled. Ethan lost the beat twice more and just stared at the crescent of the guitar that he could see just past my hip. We gave it up at 10, when usually we jam well into the AM. We were packing up, and Leslie said to me, "Why don't you just bring your old guitar to the venues tomorrow?" "Don't be crazy," I said. "You know how much I paid for this?" Actually, I had gotten it for a steal, but it was the easiest thing to say, a lot easier than that I had still hoped to make it sing like angels. "Just in case," she said. "This is going to be a good show. The venue draws a good crowd, so we have something to fall back on if your baby derails us again." "It's just a guitar," I said again. "You shouldn't say that," Ethan said. "No wonder it won't sing for you when you talk about it that way." I said it was just a guitar, but I don't think I believed it myself. I mustn't have, because on the bus home, I talked to it. "I'm sorry if I was trying to show off with you," I said. "Tomorrow night, I promise I won't pay attention to the crowd. I'll just listen to you. I want to hear you sing again, the way you did when I first played you." The guitar, of course, had nothing to say. Neither did my fellow bus passengers. Late at night on city buses, nobody talks to the people who talk to inanimate objects. "You should have a name," I said, and then reconsidered. "You probably have a name. I shouldn't make up a name for someone as important as you. If you ever can tell me your name, then I'll use it." At that point, the man next to me put down the newspaper and stood up to get off the bus. Most of the paper was obscured by an ad for great bargains at Walgreens, but I could just see a word and a half of the headline. Hastur. A cold dread crept up my spine. It was a coincidence in imagination. I moved the ad circular to expose the full headline. "Cemetery killer suspect has turned himself in." See, it wasn't an answer to my question. What was I imagining? That there just so happened to be the exact headline in the paper needed for Hastur to show me his name when I asked? Or maybe he had mystically transformed the newspaper. I mean, if he could have done that, then he could have just as easily scratched his name in the seat of the cushion, and that would have been much sorer than giving me a word and a half to guess at his name. Or maybe he just reached across time and space, made the killer turn himself in, and made the publisher compose the headline so that this would happen here, now, and when I asked. Hastur, the king in yellow, the vast, tentacled creature who drives men mad just to be looked upon. Or maybe a man dropped his newspaper and my imagination scared me. "If Hastur is your name," I said softly, "give me a sign, and make something green fall into my lap." I held my breath. I'd been specific about the sign I wanted because I knew how easily occult swindlers could suck people in. I asked for a sign and something happens. Anything. A dog barks, the bus driver goes over a bump, the old man across from me coughs. Something is always sure to happen. The sign. But nothing happened. Nothing landed in my lap, green or otherwise. See? No omnipotent elder being was reaching out of the void to introduce himself to me. Occam's razor. The simplest solution. I was scaring myself. I arrived at my stop. I stood up and got off. As I stepped on the first stair, the driver called to me. "Hey, son." I looked back. "Matthew 4, verse 7. "Huh?" I said intelligently. "Matthew 4, verse 7. It'll answer your question." "What question?" I asked. "How should I know? Look it up. Have a good night now." "You too," I said, and stepped off the bus. If you lived in Boston as long as I have, you've probably had random strangers quote Bible verses at you. You probably even looked them up. I never had before, but I was getting a weird feeling, and it was a weird exchange, and it usually wasn't the bus driver who does it. I took out my phone and looked it up. Jesus said unto him, "It is written again, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." My gut got that floaty feeling again. I'd asked for a sign, a specific sign, and instead I got rebuked. This was ridiculous. I started off home. The line from the Bible was, "Do not tempt God." It was about how to treat God. The rule didn't transfer to any other supernatural being, but this righteous denial didn't even last the short walk to my apartment. As Antonio had said in Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, the devil can cite scripture for his own purpose. I locked my door carefully that night. Then I put Hastur in the foyer closet, as far from my bedroom as I could. Even so, I had weird dreams. I dreamt that my old girlfriend, Amelia, had been transformed into a guitar, my right hand plucking the strings, and my left was on the fretboard and was squeezing her neck. The strings were her carotid arteries. I pinched them close against the frets, cutting off the flow of blood to her brain. When I played a chord, she could not breathe at all. After a few F-sharp power chords, the sound from my guitar grew weak and fluttery. After a few more, it stopped making any sound at all. I kept playing her dead body. I woke near 11 a.m., groggy and annoyed. In the light of day, it all looked so stupid. My guitar was possessed by the spirit of an ancient evil force. Not just any ancient evil force, a fictional entity made up by H.P. Lovecraft, to spook Victorian gentlemen, while implicitly reassuring them that they were the guardians of civilization against the unknown terrors of the past. What was Lovecraft anyway but an attempt to modernize medieval fears of witches and devils? Instead, you had cultists and cosmic entities, so much more scientific. Or what, that I had bad dreams? Of course I had bad dreams. They weren't caused by the malign influence of an entity in my guitar. They were caused by my imagination of an entity in my guitar. My night terrors banished by the cold light of reason, I turned my powerful intellect to the next question of how to recapture the sound that I had first heard. There were two possible explanations suggested to me, that it was the acoustics of the basement, or that it was the amplifier. Neither sounded likely, but I knew which one I wanted to be true. If that sound had been a quirk of the acoustics in the basement, I could never recapture it, not unless I persuaded the pawnbroker to give me the consorts of his basement. But if it was the amplifier, I could, in theory, get the right amplifier. I looked up what it would cost to get an old tube amplifier and was surprised to see that they weren't insanely expensive. Not that I had another $500 in my bank account, but I could get it if I knew for sure that it would give me the sound that I wanted. I spent the day calling over guitarists that I could think of who might have a tube amplifier and be willing to let me try it, and by 3 o'clock I ran out of ideas. Except for the obvious one. Go back to the pawn shop. That, of course, came with an obvious problem, his threat to kill me, but I doubted that was serious. The man had insisted that he would not negotiate the price of his guitar, and then dropped it from $2,000 to $300 in a heartbeat. His threat to kill me was probably a negotiation tactic as well. He'd hoped that I would come in afraid, and I'd walk in the door with a fistful of cash leading the way. Suddenly, I saw it all. He hadn't dropped the price of the guitar. When I came back and asked for the amplifier, the price would suddenly be $1,700. He threatened to kill me, so I wouldn't come back until I had that $1,700 in cash in my hand. Which was I to do? Drop a load of money in hopes that it would be the right thing, or raise 3 times as much? But no. At 7, I sent a text to Ethan, reminding him of our show that night. He hadn't forgotten a show in a long time, but the couple of times he had were bad scenes. In those days, we played short sets in small pubs where the owners were used to the occasional no-show and disappointing performance. The Venus was a big venue, though, and the owner had a reputation of vindictiveness. He owned clubs in several cities and had a lot of friends, or more likely a lot of dirt to blackmail other club owners. Bands who screwed him got screwed. I'd heard of one band who produced documentation that 3 out of the 4 of them tested positive for COVID-19. The manager told them, the only doctor's note Mr. Hawkins will accept is the one signed by a coroner. As the hour of the show drew closer, my sunny courage began to wane. I didn't really notice at first. I threw both guitars into Leslie's trunk, but I told myself that it was because she asked me to, because it would promote band community and all that. But still, I thought of my new guitar as Haster. Still, I made sure it was propped against the wall firmly and on the side of the trunk so that it would feel properly cared for and respected. We swung by Ethan's to find that he wasn't home. No lights, no sound, no sign. You did remind him of the show tonight, didn't you? Leslie asked. Of course, I said. I checked my phone, no reply. I called him. After 6 rings, it went to voicemail. Dude, I'm either on my phone or I can't find it. Leave me a message. Hey, asshole, we've got a show tonight at the Venus. Where the hell are you? I hung up. Leslie's eyes were barely visible through all of her hair. They were big and afraid. What are we gonna do? She asked. Go on as a 2-piece? I asked. She shook her head. Unless we brought the house down, Hawkins would call it a breach of contract. Then we gotta get a sub, I said. Who do we know that could sit in? With no notice? She gaped. That's crazy. Oh, maybe he'll call back, I said. We can't wait, she said. If we were going to find a sub, we would need to start calling like 5 hours ago. My phone rang. Thank God, I said. But it wasn't Ethan. It was an unknown number. I was desperate enough to answer it anyway. Is this Liam? The voice on the other end said. Yeah, I answered. My guts started to unmoor themselves again. I just knew this was bad. This is Stephen Brooks. I'm a nurse at McLean Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of Ethan. He isn't well and won't be able to make the show tonight. What? I said, although I heard him perfectly well. McLean Hospital, first in psychiatry since 1818. Ethan is being treated here. His condition is stable, but he insisted it was urgent that you get this message. What's wrong with him? I asked. I'm afraid I can't give you any more information about his condition, but he'll be very reassured to know that you got his message. Yeah, I said. Then, finally finding some compassion in my soul, I added, tell him it's fine. We'll get a sub. It'll be okay. I hung up. What is it? Leslie asked, reading my face. He's cracked up. He's in the mental hospital. Okay, Leslie said, eyes darting back and forth, as if she were reading some emergency manual in her head. She pulled out her keys. You drive. I'm going to call every drummer that I can think of until somebody says that they can come. If I have to, I'll promise him half of our fee. If you have to, promise him everything, I said. It's better than blowing this gig. Shit. I drove the van, and Leslie called. The first person apologized and said it was impossible. And then she got a voicemail. The third person laughed at her, and I could hear him over the car noise. The fourth sounded afraid at the prospect of going on stage to play songs that he'd never heard before. Leslie tried reassuring him that he didn't have to be great, just hold the beat and jam. Then she tried bribing him with money. He didn't bite. After that, she just sat in the van and stared at her phone. Try someone else, I said. I can't think of anyone else. What about, who's that guy who plays the Doom Cell? They're on tour in Philadelphia. Or Pongo. Pongo, what's his name? That's who I was just talking to. Hold on, call Honey. Who's Honey? I asked, but she'd been talking to her phone. Leslie blushed. An old boyfriend? He must have picked up because she suddenly said, Hey, you'll never guess who this is. Oh, you guessed. How are you? It's been so long. Yeah, well, I'm kind of in an emergency here. I've got a show at the Venus in at the Venus. Thanks. It would be good news if our drummer hadn't finked on us on the last... in 2 hours. Well, I can get you. Where are you? Worcester? Yeah, I can do that. Worcester, are you crazy? I said. Have your gear by the road. This is gonna be tight. That's insane, I said. That's over an hour each way. We'll never make it. Yeah, I can do it, Leslie said, ignoring me. Yeah, be ready. Be at the side of the road in 70 minutes, okay? Are you insane? I said. Do you know how Hawkins will do to us if we're even half an hour late? Yeah, Bear, she said into the phone. You're saving my ass. See you soon. She hung up. This won't work, I said. This is going to have to work, she said. Drive to Venus and get out. I'm going to drive like hell to Worcester. When your time comes, you go out. Say you're the opening act and play a solo. If I don't get stopped by Massachusetts' finest, I'll be there before you're 10 minutes in. With luck, the audience will be too busy staring at your guitar that they won't even notice. Without luck, the bouncer will entertain the crowds just by kicking my ass. Yeah, well, I'm going to be riding for an hour with a guy that I don't get along with, who's going to be wondering how grateful I am that he helped out. So, pardon my lack of pity. There's gotta be someone else, I said. What about... I did come up with 2 more names before she dropped me off, but one she couldn't reach, and the other was playing a show already. When she drove away, her SUV leaned precariously around the front corner. I was there way early, of course. I wound up standing in the alley with our guitars and amplifiers for 15 minutes, hoping that the manager would show up before some enterprising gangster. He did. I set everything up, around a sound check, got a beer, and waited in the green room while the crowd started to file in. 15 minutes before the showtime, the manager checked in. Where are the rest of them? They'll be along, I said, trying to be casual. I'm gonna open solo. What? He scowled at me. I booked a band. You got a band, I said. Plus, it's just an opening act. It'll be like folks see 2 bands for the price of 1. A 15-minute teaser. That's not in the contract, he said. Not that we had a contract. If one person asks for his cover back during your opening act, I'll have your ass. Deal, I said. By the time I took the stage, my dread of the guitar was creeping back. Ethan was in the mental hospital the day after he couldn't take his eyes off my guitar, and now I was going on stage to perform in front of 200 people. If there was anything, was I putting the sanity of 200 people at risk? I had the other guitar. I didn't have to take Haster on stage, but the thought was of no reassurance either. I had no idea how I was going to keep a club full of people entertained for half an hour by myself. Of course, I lied to the manager. They'd want to dance, and I had no rhythm section. Even if the manager didn't follow through on his threat, the last thing we needed was for the crowd to be impatient and pissed off before we even started playing. No, the only reason I dared to try this was because I had Haster to hide behind. I laid my hand on the case. Haster, I said, I need you. We're going to go out in front of a big crowd, and I need you to sing for them. Get us through this, and I'll... What does one even offer an enchanted guitar? I said the first thing that came to my mind. A tube amplifier. I'll get you a vintage tube amplifier, just like the one that was at the pawn shop. Seriously? I was bargaining with my guitar. I downed my beer and snapped open the case and took it out. Yes, I avoided looking at it as much as I possibly could. And just as I was leaving the green room, I saw a yellow scarf hanging on the back of a chair. A sheer mustard yellow scarf that was left behind by some girl band or something. Without even a conscious thought, I swept it up and wrapped it around my head so only my eyes were showing. I walked out onto stage without any idea of what I was going to play. I took comfort in knowing that whatever happened, though, it wouldn't be associated with my face. The club was barely half full, but still, that meant 200 eyes trained on me. By special arrangement, I said, opening for the Chthonic Circus, the King in Yellow. There, Hastur. All the glory was to be yours. Having no idea what else to do, I started playing the opening notes of Stairway to Heaven. A lame choice. Every bar band in the amateur cover league played Stairway to Heaven, hoping to cop some of its glory. But it was the official song you always played to try out a new guitar. It did sound better. There was a difference. I got the feeling that Hastur was really trying as hard as he could, but it wasn't half of the glory of the pawn shop. It needed the tubes, vacuum tubes. Glass globes containing a tiny piece of the void where Hastur himself, not the guitar, was imprisoned, restlessly sleeping. It needed to touch the void to give full voice. Whatever, it was enough. The crowd stood, transfixed, unable to take their eyes off me. I didn't sing. I can sing, mind you. I often fill in harmony and counterpoint vocals with Leslie, but I didn't want to have Hastur to share the stage with me. When I thought of the instrumental of Stairway to Heaven couldn't go any further, I morphed into the opening riff of Heart's Barracuda. Played that for a while. I didn't see any movement in the audience. Even the waiters who were supposed to be selling drinks and milking the crowd for cash were not winding through them. When I got all I could out of Heart, I threw a caution to the wind. The King in Yellow was not a cover band. I didn't want to play something from the Chthonic sets either, so I just started improvising. A surge of power chords spiked with bright overtones. I drove as fast as I could, trying to create a wall of sound with only 6 strings. The next thing I knew, I was fingerpicking a bass line for the 2 low strings while simultaneously leading on the 4 high notes. It was insane. It wasn't me playing. My fingers moved faster than I could track, spinning a web of dark and terrible music. It was Hastur playing through me. I lost all track of time. I had no idea how long it was before I spied a chubby man at the foot of the stage, waving for my attention. A small feminine hand clasped over his eyes. I looked again, and I could barely see Leslie standing on tippy-toe behind him to peer over his shoulder. The band had come. With some effort, I took control of my hands and ended the song. Back in the green room, I put Hastur in the case and unwrapped the scarf from around my head. Leslie stuck her head in the door. "Is it safe?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, not even thinking what a crazy question that was. She came in breathless. "Fuck, when I told you to open, I didn't think you'd upstage us." I didn't know what I was doing," I said. "The doorman didn't even look at me when I told him I was with the band. He just kinda grunted. Brune came into a dead stop when he saw you, and I had to cover his eyes just to guide him down towards the stage." "Where is he?" "Setting up his drums, of course. Are you ready?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I'm probably gonna switch to Gus. That was my old guitar. Yes, I named him when I was 16. Gus the guitar." "That might be for the best. I don't think I want to share the stage with that thing. It'd be like singing a duet with Aretha Franklin, or something." A knock sounded on the door. Leslie cracked it open and peeked out. "There's a guy here for the meme. He says he wants to talk to the King in Yellow." "Who?" Leslie said. "Yeah, send him in," I said. Leslie gaped at me and then rolled her eyes. In walked a slick-looking guy in designer jeans and professionally styled sideburns. He glanced at me. "You the King in Yellow?" Let's say that I speak for him," I said, in case Hastur was listening. "I want to book you for the meme this Saturday." "Saturday?" Leslie gaped. Saturdays at the meme were for bands on record contracts, professional musicians on a tier below arena rock. "There are 3 girls crying in the lobby right now while the bouncer calls them a cab," Mr. Slick said. "The doorman just walked off the job saying that he was going to do something with his life while he still had a chance. The bartender can't sell drinks fast enough. You aren't playing anywhere else between now and then, are you?" "No," I said. "I know a guy at Columbia. I'm gonna call him, and he's going to sign you. But he's going to sign you at the meme. You're going to be discovered at the meme. You understand?" I need an advance of $1,600, I said. I was astonished as everyone else was at the words coming out of my mouth. The man chuckled uneasily. "Don't get cocky. Columbia will be happy to throw money at you, but first, you've got to do the show." I needed an advance of $1,700 to do the show, my voice said again. Then, since I was talking so cool, I decided to act cool too. I picked up Gus and turned to Leslie. You ready to go on? Wait, the man barked. He took out his cell phone. Yeah. Hi, Cindy. This is Mark. Listen, a guy is going to come by the club tomorrow morning and call himself the King in Yellow. I want you to give him $1,700 in cash. I'll take care of that when I get there. Hang on. He looked at me. What time will you be there? 1? I said. 1 in the afternoon. Yeah, that's right. He hung up the phone and glared at me. All right, he said. You can take your $1,700 and head off to Mexico if you like. Or you can show up on Saturday, play my show, and walk into the life of a rock star. Your choice. He walked out, leaving me with Leslie staring at me like I had betrayed her. Like all this time, I was just pretending to be a regular person, and now it turned out that I was secretly a god. She thought we were friends, but she was only a stepping stool to stardom. Fuck, she said. She looked on the verge of tears. Come with me, I said. It doesn't have to be a solo act. I probably need some help out there. She shook her head. I think I'd only hold you back more. If this is going to be the last show for the Chthonic Circus, then let's make it a good one. It wasn't. Our heart wasn't in it. Brune was able to fit himself in well enough, but it wasn't like having a real drummer. He couldn't add to the songs. Leslie was heartbroken. I was confused. If we'd been any other band, we'd probably have been booed off the stage, but the Chthonic Circus, well, Leslie was able to leverage Heartbroken to our songs easily enough, so we held it together. After the first set, I thought about going out with Hastur again, but I didn't dare. I didn't think he'd want to share the stage either. The next day, I collected my $1,700 in cash and headed back to the pawn shop, Hastur in hand. Just to keep him from asking for even more money, I kept $500 in my wallet and another $500 in my sock. I didn't doubt that he would ask for as much as he thought he could get, but I thought $1,700 in my fist would be enough to stave off homicide. We could dicker about the rest later. But the pawn shop was gone. I didn't mean it was closed, it was gone. The stone facade still stood. Through the shattered windows, I could see charred timbers and a few metal remains. There was a metal ladder bent out of shape from the heat of the fire, balanced on blackened floor jolts. Yellow police tape stretched across the windows and warned everyone to stay out. I stopped in at the flower shop across the street and asked the lady there. Good riddance, too, she said. He made the whole block creepy. How'd it happen? Arson, she said. They think he probably said it himself to collect the insurance money. The police picked him up in Mexico. He won't see a dime. The lady wanted to say more about the intelligence of someone who tries to pull off an insurance scam while simultaneously skipping the country, but I had to check one thing. Fire burns up. It was possible, unlikely, but possible that the amp was still there in the basement unscathed. I parted the police tape and climbed through the window into the burned-out shop. There wasn't much floor left. I kept my feet on the joists and hoped that they were sound. The sun was high in the sky, but I could see down into the basement well enough. It was piled with litter, half-burnt boards, globs of melted glass, various metal things that had fallen through the floor. Plenty of burning things had landed in the basement, but there was the hulking old furnace, and there was the freezer chest. It was scorched and pitted, but not warped out of shape. There was a pile of ash and junk that might have been covering the amplifier. The stairs to the basement were still in place, but they were so black that I worried that they were mostly charcoal. I stepped from joist to joist until I could get the aluminum ladder, slightly twisted, but it seemed sound. I eased it between the two joists and jammed it into the junk of the floor. It was so bent that there was no way to brace it on all four corners. I got both feet on the floor and one side on the top braced, and called it good enough. I held tight to a joist as long as I could, just in case, but it got me at the bottom intact. A cloud of ash floated up around me. I floundered across the wreckage, flung aside the frame of a flexible flyer, and a broken panel of sheetrock. And there it was, unburnt and undamaged, barely a scorch mark on her. Getting the amp out of the basement was an ordeal. It might have been possible to pass it between the floor jolts, but it was so big and heavy that I knew the odds were better that I just drop it and it would shatter the irreplaceable tubes. In the end, I decided to chance the stairs after all. If I fell through and killed myself, it wouldn't matter that I wrecked the amp. I got it out. There's nothing left to tell but the concert. The meme was not very crowded that night, maybe 100 folks, including the guy from Colombia. I walked out on stage, the yellow scarf around my face, and I began to play. I noticed the screaming at first one and then others. People threw their arms over their faces and covered their ears. It didn't make any difference. They fled for the exits, so many at once, as they ran into each other. The first probably made it out, but when they jammed in the door, others tried to climb over them, trampling, crushing, tearing. I saw one man try to smash through the wall with his head. Either that or he was trying to kill himself. I could no more have stopped playing than grow wings and fly. Somewhere along there, the tentacles began to reach through. I think they first came out of the storm sewers, but in parts of Boston, the storm sewers connect to the municipal sewage. So as soon as they burst out of the drains and restrooms and basements, by the time they were reaching into the concert hall, most of the people were already dead. The remainder were pulled apart or disappeared into an engulfing mass. The bartender climbed up to the top shelf and started a fire by throwing a bottle of 151 on the hot grill. Then he threw more liquor at the flames until the whole bar was burning. He kept the tentacles away until he roasted himself. Then, all at once, the guitar ceased to exist. Frets and strings and wires sprang free and clattered around my feet. I had control of my body once again, but I knew what this meant. From every sewer gate and every sooth, the shapeless mass was oozing. The terrible deed was done. Hastur was in the world. I escaped out of the backstage door and ran. I don't need to tell you more. You heard it from 1,000 other voices. The only curious question is why, or how I survived. When I was there at the center of the maelstrom where it all began, why wasn't I eaten? Why didn't I perish in the fires? Why am I still at least somewhat sane? Was it some reward, some expression of gratitude that I was spared? I doubt it. 'Cause what use has Hastur for gratitude? I think, rather, it's the opposite. It's his exquisite torture for me. No matter where I run to, no matter how I hide, I hear the news. Another city has fallen to madness and fire, more tentacles reaching out of the sea, nuclear missiles annihilating the survivors if there are any, but never, never slowing the inexorable spread of destruction. I hear the news and know it was my hands that made it happen, even if I hadn't been in control of them. I tried to find Leslie, I did, but I doubt she made it out of Boston. Hardly anyone did. But in case she is still alive somewhere, that's not her real name. I don't want anyone killing her for her association with me. The only question left is whether Hastur will bore the planet before he exterminated the human race. I think there's a chance of that. To pursue us until the last one is dead, that would take a real dedication to the cause. Though, I don't think he cares enough about humans to bother. Kids may have fun burning ants with a magnifying glass, but even the meanest kid doesn't dig up the nearest nest and hunt until every last ant is dead. No, there's other nests, other worlds to destroy. But I hear England is burning. Oceans are no barrier, and he's not bored yet.